Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the universe, we gather this evening from the four corners of the earth with a single heart, with a singular focus on the sacred task of Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the Jewish year. Kol nidrei, all our vows, obligations, and pledges, all the promises that we have made. So much this year is broken. Our traditions, the family meals, the college students who would be flying in, driving in, sitting at the tables together, preparing for the fast. Some can't make the journey. Some never left. Parents blessing their children for the year to come, Yontif candles lit in the presence of our grandchildren. Those rituals, those traditions, those recipes, those commitments we know have been put on hold this year. How we long for the sight and the feel of a packed sanctuary, the prayers that we chant on and off key with loved ones and stranger at our side, the melodies that bind us to each other one generation to the next. This is a year unlike any other. What a gift of normalcy it would be to tell someone that they're sitting in our seat, to shush that person, to tell that person to put their cell phone away. We miss it all. The old friend that we would look forward to bumping into, the person we have not seen but we greet with a hug, the community member sitting alone who we invite to break fast with us. None of those vows, none of those traditions fulfilled this year. God, there is so much broken. Our vows and obligations are but one of the many measures signaling where we have fallen short. Our world and we ourselves broken. But this evening is a night of hope. It is a vow to rebuild. Tonight, God, we call on you to meet us halfway. Tonight, we will resolve to mend our ways, and you, God, we ask you to be a partner in mending this world. Give us the strength to be restored to our former selves. Grant us a wisdom to find a path forward. Instill in us the humility to admit when we have been wrong. Bestow on us the love that will be needed for us to forgive those seeking reconciliation. There is so much work that needs to be done. The landscape of our lives littered with broken promises. The shards are sharp and they lay there for all to behold. Gently, carefully, and boldly, let's commit to the work of the next 24 hours. We, the entire congregation of the people of Israel, and the stranger that dwells amongst us, we have erred, and we seek to be forgiven. We seek to be restored. May our prayers this evening be heard and answered as in generations before with God's words, Salachti kidvarecha, I have forgiven as you have asked. Please rise. Let's open up our machzor. We're on page 204. The ark is open. The Sefer Torah removed from the ark, page 204.
Zaru ala tzadik, ulishrei lev simcha. Ulishrei lev simcha. Or zaru ala tzadik, 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 ulishrei lev simcha. בישיבה של מעלה ובישיבה של מטה, על דת המקום ועל דת הקהל, אנו מתירים להתפלל עם העבריינים.
By the authority of the court on high and by the authority of this court below, with divine consent and with the consent of this congregation, we grant permission to pray with those who have transgressed. Page 205, Kol Nidre.
Yom Kippurim ad Yom Kippurim Abalenu. Sheviti Betelin umefutalin Nideranna la nidere vesarana Oshvoatana
All vows, renunciations, bans, oaths, formulas of obligation, pledges and promises that we vow or promise to ourselves and to God from this Yom Kippur to the next, may it approach us for good. We hereby retract. May they all be undone, repealed, canceled, voided, annulled, and regarded as neither valid nor binding. Our vows shall not be considered vows, our renunciations shall not be considered renunciations, and our promises shall not be considered promises. Kol Nidre, page 205.
Kol Nidre, I am grateful for this, a moment of truth, grateful to stand before you in judgment. You know me as a liar, and I am flooded with relief to have my darkest self exposed at last. Every day I break my vows to be the dutiful child, the selfless parent, the caring friend, responsible citizen of the world. No one sees, no one knows how often I take the easy way. I let myself off the hook, give myself the benefit of the doubt every day, every day. On this day, this one day, I stand before you naked, without disguise, without embellishment, naked, shivering, ridiculous. I implore you, let me try again. A poem by Merle Feld. Kol Nidre, page 205.
נסלח לכל הדת בני ישראל ולגר הגר בתוכם כי לכל העם בשגגה ונסלח לכל הדת בני ישראל ולגר הגר בתוכן כי לכל העם בשגגה סלח נא לעוונם הזה כגודל חסדך, וכאשר נסעת לעם הזה ממצרים ועד הנה, ושם נאמר, ויאמר אדוני, סלחתי כדבריך, ויאמר אדוני, סלחתי כדבריך, ויאמר אדוני, סלחתי כדבריך, סלחתי כדבריך. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם. Sing with me.
Praised are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, for keeping us in life and sustaining us, enabling us to reach this sacred occasion. Amen. You may be seated. I want to thank our chairman, Mark Becker. I want to thank our past chairman, Art Penn, and Steve Friedman for holding the Sifrei Torah through the chanting of Kol Nidre. Just as you held the Sifrei Torah this evening, you hold our community and held our community over the years, and we thank you and all our past chairmen. You know, during this time, this year that has been a year like no other, it has challenged us. It has been a difficult year. But what I've discovered is that if you have great teammates, and if you have trust, and you have confidence in them and them in you, then there is no problem, no challenge that cannot be overcome. And Park Avenue Synagogue, speaking on behalf of the clergy and the staff of the synagogue, are blessed with a strong and able and inspired and tireless leadership. The partnership between the lay leaders and the professionals of Park Avenue Synagogue, that relationship, that bond, that's our North Star that has guided us through these waters all these months. The leader of that effort on the lay side is my dear friend, Mark Becker. Mark Becker, I thank you on behalf of all of the clergy and all of the staff. I thank you on behalf of the entire board that you lead so ably. And I thank you on behalf of the entire community, grateful for all of your efforts. It's a great pleasure to introduce our chairman, Mark Becker, to share words of welcome on this Kol Nidre evening.
Thank you, Rabbi Cosgrove. Shana Tova. Ma nishtana halayla hazeh. Why is this night different? Shebachol halaylot, on all other nights. While we usually hear these words on Passover, they feel especially relevant this evening, because on all other Kol Nidre nights, as chairman of Park Avenue Synagogue, I'd address our congregation 3 times at 3 different locations to see 6,000 of our members. This year, we're all experiencing something very different. Like you, as opposed to looking around shul at family and friends, I'm in a much different setting than on all other nights. I stand here in our beautiful sanctuary in front of empty pews that are only crammed with people. But while the seats are unoccupied, our Torahs are surrounded by the love of our community and those to whom we've opened up our virtual doors. All 30,000 plus of you who are joining us today. It's not lost on me that less than a year after completion of our expanding campus, we can't be physically present. But as we said at our building rededication at Hanukkah, it was never about the physical space, but rather about our community and the values we embody. Many have talked about silver linings these past 6 months, and the high holidays are no exception. I have had the opportunity to hear our rabbi's powerful sermons alongside my family, instead of scurrying from location to location. Perhaps for you, it's the ability to FaceTime with a grandparent, child, or friend while hearing the angelic voice of Cantor Schwartz. Or maybe it's just nice to attend high holiday services in sweatpants and a t-shirt. But beyond the silver linings, I'd so much rather be together with you right now. I've missed being here at Park Avenue Synagogue. I miss our community. And I know we've been all feeling these sentiments these past 6 pandemic months. I received an email from a board member about her 3-year-old grandchild, who after months of social distancing said, "Grandma, how come I don't have friends anymore?" Hearing that broke my heart. But in some form or another, we're all asking ourselves similar questions. How do we find community when we're separated? How do we find meaning in this virtual world? Of course, if there's one thing that people share in this unsettling moment, it's a profound sense of loss in human connection. That's why Park Avenue Synagogue is the source that connects us to ourselves and to each other. While times change, people change, and now even mediums change, the one constant for 2,000 years remains one synagogue. As Rabbi Jonathan Sachs aptly stated, communities of faith where we preserve the values and institutions that protect our humanity. For generations, the haunting melody of the Kol Nidre prayer that was just chanted has reminded us of just that. This particular melody, on this particular day, and at this particular hour, takes us back to the same meaningful place we've come to for generations when we're trying to find our spiritual way, the synagogue. L'Ador Vador, the synagogue has been the torch that has showed us the way through times of light and darkness, through the cycle of life and death, from Brit Milahs to Yorsites. Although this pandemic may have slowed the world down, it has inspired us at Park Avenue Synagogue. It has motivated us to enhance and to accelerate our offerings so that we can continue to be the place, the community you can always turn to. We will adapt. We will evolve to do whatever it takes, in the words of our mission, to inspire, educate, and support each other towards living passion-filled Jewish lives. With that in mind, when the pandemic hit, we committed to 3 guiding principles, which Park Avenue Synagogue continues to stand by. First and foremost, no one will ever be turned away because of economic circumstances. Second, our employees are stakeholders and will endeavor to retain our staff. And third, we'll continue to provide the excellence that our members expect and deserve to make sure that our institution thrives for the generations to come. I can proudly say we've been able to uphold all these principles, and it's because we were in an extremely strong position before the pandemic. Our strength starts with our incredible clergy who work day and night for our community. Rabbi Cosgrove, your selflessness, integrity, and steady leadership in these uncertain times makes me proud to call you my rabbi. Cantor Schwartz, your beautiful voice is only matched by your menschlichkeit, and you set a tone for all of us to follow. Rabbi Zuckerman, your kindness and heart are a true gift. Rabbi Wachowski, your wit and tireless efforts have inspired our community. Cantor Brook, your warmth and uplifting spirit has comforted us week in and week out. And Rabbi Philp, you've been there for anything our members have needed. We are blessed with the best clergy team in the world. Toda Rabbah. Our spiritual leaders are partnered with so many remarkable individuals. Our loyal executive director, Beryl Chernoff, our unrelenting associate executive director, Liz Offenbach, and our devoted director of congregational education, Rabbi Charlie Savador. They, along with their teams, have put aside their own personal lives at times so they can take care of all of us. Toda Rabbah. In March, our officers immediately went into crisis mode, meeting weekly and creating task forces to solve all sorts of problems, making sure that our standard of excellence never wavered. A huge amount of gratitude to our officers, the indefatigable, Lizzie Marcus, Nan Rubin, Amy Steiner, Mark First, Craig Solomon, Mark Hirsch, and our president, Natalie Barth. Your passion for our community is never ending, and your leadership and stewardship is exemplary. And to the rest of our board, committee chairs, staff, and volunteers, you are simply amazing. Your effort this past spring, calling every single member over 60 years old to check and make sure they were safe, epitomizes Park Avenue Synagogue values. With such strong leadership at the helm, a committed community, and the investments in technology and infrastructure made during our renovation, we were prepared for the uncertainty that came in March. We were able to focus not on survival, but rather on delivering excellence and being there for those who needed us. We moved our daily minions, Shabbat services, classes, baby namings, b'nai mitzvahs, weddings, and shivas to a virtual world in a matter of days. And the response has been incredible. People are tuning in from all over New York City, our sixth borough, Florida, from Brazil to Budapest, and as far away as Israel and Australia. Our daily minyan has quadrupled in attendance. We've had over 100,000 views of our Shabbat services. Thousands of people have attended our adult learning classes online, and our study circles continue to grow. Our Zoom Havdalah had over 100 participating families each night and gave me the chance to light my first Havdalah candle. We created virtual summer programming, a camp for our youngest members, and a lecture series for our adult community with speakers like Madeline Albright and Admiral McGraven. We've expanded our interfaith learning by adding new classes and riveting discussions with faith leaders and thinkers like Cardinal Dolan and Reverend Bernard. We as a community acknowledged that change happens when each of us commits to Tikkun Olam, healing the world. As you'll hear tomorrow, our teens are doing their part. For those in need of a meal, they refocused the efforts of our teen-run food pantry. They also delivered machzorim to our homebound members. We stood in solidarity against racial injustice, inviting our dear friend, Ray Chu, of the Baptist Church of Englewood, to address our congregation about systemic racism at Kabbalat Shabbat. And now, in the spirit of our community's exceptional belief in chesed, in caring, we've made a conscious effort to open our virtual doors to anyone who would otherwise have no spiritual home, to provide what Rabbi Cosgrove calls Torah for the people. Because at the end of the day, We're all in this together. There's Manny from New Mexico, who emailed and said he's been a practicing conservative Jew for the past 70 years, and he now joins us with thousands of people from all over the world every Friday night. Manny, I hope you're watching tonight. Good Yontif. There's an administrator from a Jewish elder care home in Princeton who enjoyed our live stream so much they're setting up chairs for over 100 people in their own senior community. Gemar Tov to our neighbors in the Garden State. 99-year-old Sylvia from Connecticut messaged us on Livestream last Sunday saying she loved our Rosh Hashanah service. Sylvia, if we're all able to next year be together, we invite you at age 100 to join us in the sanctuary. Now, tickets will be hard to come by, but I have a few connections around here. Over the past 6 months, our clergy, staff, and board have received an influx of similar messages from our members and from Jews across the diaspora thanking Park Avenue Synagogue for filling the void. We, our Park Avenue Synagogue community, should feel so proud of what we have achieved during the pandemic and throughout our history. It is the active engagement of our current leaders and the generations before us that have enabled us to become who we are today. We are in a strong position because of them. But now, it's all of our turn. Despite our progress, we're not without challenges, including trends of deurbanization and one of the most difficult economic environments we have seen. Each year, we continue to depend on your financial support, and our community's annual giving and generosity has been exemplary. Last year, we raised approximately $3 million from about 1,000 families, enabling us to balance our budget and break even. Many of you have already stepped up, joining my family by increasing your Kol Nidre appeal gift from last year. I sincerely thank you. For those of you who have yet to recommit, or even those who are listening from afar for the first time, we need your support so we can continue the excellence of Park Avenue Synagogue. Ma nishtana halayla hazeh. Why is it different this time? Because on all other nights, we might just tell ourselves we can wait and see. But tonight, during a time when we need each other the most, we need to commit to each other. We need to commit to our synagogue. We need to commit to continuing the momentum our community has courageously begun. The thread holding us all together is the fact that we're united in our faith and bound together by our synagogue. We are in this together, those who can do for those who cannot. There's something special that you, and you alone, can contribute to our community through tzedakah, engagement, and volunteering. And we need to, because there shouldn't be a child or anyone who has to ask, where are my friends? There shouldn't be a parent or grandparent or anyone who has to say Sabbath prayers alone. That's why Park Avenue Synagogue is here. Let's do our part in passing down not only our heritage, but our synagogue, L'Dor V'Dor. I want to close with another message that was shared with us, one that relates to what I said in the beginning, about the questions we're asking ourselves and the answers we find in this sacred place. A member talked about having had a really tough time with isolation during the quarantine, but how their spirits were kept high because of Park Avenue Synagogue. They said, I just feel that my hand and my heart have been held. Our commitment to our members in the broader diaspora, regardless of what challenges and opportunities lie on the horizon, will be to make sure that Park Avenue Synagogue holds as many hands, as many hearts as we possibly can. Gemar Chatima Tova may be inscribed and sealed in the book of life for a year of happiness, health, peace, and prosperity, and may we soon be back together, Shebachol Halelot, like all other nights. Now, there are no ushers coming to your living room to collect envelopes, but you can easily contribute by clicking the donate button in the right-hand corner of this live stream, or by visiting psyn.org at any time and clicking the giving option. Thank you.
To Mark Becker, to you, to your whole family, we wish you a Shana Tova, we wish you a Gemar Chatima Tova, we wish you strength, and we thank you for your leadership of our community. You know, during this time, I am more aware than ever that sometimes the cameras are on and sometimes the cameras are off. And the measure of a person is not when the cameras are on, it's the small, courageous, and constant acts that they perform when the cameras are off, when no one's looking. In our chairman, in Mark, we have such an individual who acts with righteousness, with leadership, and with grace when the cameras are on, and especially when the cameras are off. We thank you, Mark, for all that you do for our community. We continue our services with Mariv for Yom Kippur. We are on page 207. Please rise. Baruch, page 207.
Baruch Adonai Amvorach Leolam Avaed.
You may be seated.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bidvaro mariv aravim. Umavir yom umevir layla umavdil ben yom uben layla Adonai tzevaot shemo elechai vekayam תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם הבאר ברוך אתה אדוני
You have loved your people, the house of Israel, with infinite love. You've taught us Torah and mitzvot, statutes and laws. Therefore, Adonai our God, as we lie down or rise up, we shall think of your laws and speak of them, rejoicing in your words of Torah and your mitzvot forever and ever. For they are our life and fullness of our days. On them we will meditate day and night. May you never withdraw your love from us. Baruch atah Adonai, God who loves the people Israel, on the top of page 208, Ahavat Olam.
אהבת עולם בית ישראל עמך אהבת אהבת עולם בית ישראל עמך תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת. אהבת עולם, בית ישראל, sing with me, עמך אהבת, אהבת עולם, עמך על כן אדוני אלוהינו ושוכבנו ובקומנו דרכיך ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. Sing. אהבה גדולה בית ישראל עמך אהבת. אהבה גדולה בית ישראל עמך אהבת. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו ובהם נגי יומם ולילה. ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. אהבה גדולה בית ישראל עמך אהבת. אהבה גדולה בית ישראל עמך אהבת. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל.
Please rise, the Shema, page 208.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchoto Leolam Vaed. You may be seated. Let's read together page 208. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך. We continue with the words of the Shema on our own on page 209. Adonai Elohechem emet.
We continue silently with our meditations leading into Mi Chamocha on page 210, the Song of Liberation sung by the Israelites as they went from slaves to free men and women. So too we as we enter into the year ahead. Mi Chamocha 210.
וראו בניו גבורתו, שיבחו והודו לשמו, ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם. Let's sing together. משה ובני ישראל לך נושירה. Elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar bakodesh. Oseh Malachutecha ראו בניך בוקע הים לפני משה, זה עליינו ויאמרו אדוני ימלוך ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
We are on page 211. In a moment, we will be chanting the Hashkivenu, a prayer calling on God for peace, for Jerusalem, and for all of humanity. Some melodies that we're hearing this evening are ancient, some are new, and the melody you're about to hear for Hashkivenu is brand new these holidays, composed just this summer by Park Avenue's own Zena Goldrich. Zena has written many of our most adored melodies. How we sing Sim Shalom, how we bless our B'nai Mitzvah kids. The melodies reflect a special collaborative relationship between Zena and Cantor Schwartz. The two of them meet. Ozzy explains to Zena what he's feeling when he's chanting a certain prayer, the meaning of the words in the Hebrew, and then Zena puts that feeling to music. And we, the community, are the beneficiaries of that collaboration over and over again. So this year, Zena and Ozzy turned their attention to Hashkivenu. It was time for something new. So Zena drafted something which Ozzy listened to, but it still needed a bit of work. It wasn't there just yet. The music didn't yet reflect the hopes for peace and for Israel. So a meeting was scheduled to review it. And when the two of them got to talking, as they've done so many times before, Zena pressed Ozzy to explain to her what Hashkivenu should sound like. And it was at that point that Ozzy choked up and he broke down, because what Zena didn't know and couldn't have known is that earlier in the day, Ozzy's grandmother, Irene Yehudit Klein, had passed away in Israel. And in the tears, the two of them began to talk, not about Hashkivenu anymore, but about Ozzy's grandmother, about how she was born in Czechoslovakia, one of 9 siblings, and how she lost her entire family, and how she was hidden in a monastery, and how somehow she miraculously survived Auschwitz, and how she immigrated illegally to Israel in 1946, and how in the refugee camp of Atlit, she met the man who would become Ozzy's grandfather, Yehuda Klein of blessed memory, and how the two of them went on to create a life together. Yehuda, a businessman, but a chazan on Shabbat and holidays and at heart, who trained a generation of B'nai Mitzvah students, Benny Gantz amongst others. And how Yehudit dedicated her life to acts of chesed throughout, that in addition to raising her children, she volunteered throughout in a geriatric hospital. And Zena, she listened, as Ozzy explained how loving Yehudit was to each of her grandchildren, how every single Friday night, one grandchild would receive a full Shabbat meal, gefilte fish and all, a rotation that was never broken until just months ago. How intensely religious and traditional Yehudit was, and how deeply proud she was of her grandson Ozzy, how she understood his aspiration to renew the art of chazanut for a new generation, and how she paid for Ozzy's first album to be made, and how she watched every service, after Shabbat, of course. shaping nachas in her grandson's accomplishments. And Zina listened to it all, and she heard of Ozzy's loss, a grief compounded by his inability to be present to say goodbye in person, his inability to be at graveside, his inability to sit shiva with his family. And Zina listened, and Zina listened, and then Zina wrote. And this is what it is, the music that Zina wrote, the melody of the life of Yehudit bat Yitzchak v'Tehila. May her memory be for a blessing. Hashkivenu, page 211.
Hashkivenu, Hashkivenu, Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Leshalom, Leshalom, Leshalom. Hashkivenu, Hashkivenu, Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Leshalom, Leshalom, Leshalom. V'hamidenu Malkeinu Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Ushmor tzeiteinu vo'einu lechaim u'leshalom, lechaim u'leshalom, me'ata ve'ad olam. Baruch atah Adonai, haporeh sukat shalom, aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al
For on this day atonement shall be made for you to purify you from all your transgressors. In the presence of Adonai you shall be pure. Please rise, page 212, Ki vayom hazeh.
כי ביום הזה יכפר עליכם, לטהר אתכם מכל חטאותיכם, לפני אדוני תטהרו. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה. אלמד יברח חירותי וימליך מלכותי. בחייכם וביומכם ובחיי כל בית ישראל, בגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא. ונשא בריחו. לילה ולילה, מכל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירם בעלמה, ויאמרו
Our silent meditations begin, they are on page 213 through page 221. We'll take our time, we'll take these minutes to recite our prayers. We are spread out across the globe. The rabbis of old taught that if you are not sure in which direction to pray, then just direct your heart, and God will hear your prayers. Our prayers begin silently, page 213 and following.
Shalom bimromah, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael.
Good Yontif. More than the dorm in which I lived my freshman year, the Hillel that shaped my Jewish identity, or even the Pinball Pete's arcade where I spent many hours and lots of quarters. off my University of Michigan, there was a place that I knew I was going to make sure I took her. And that place would be the steps of the Michigan Union. Because it was on those steps in the early hours of October 14th, 1960, 60 years ago next month, that Senator John F. Kennedy arrived in Ann Arbor to spend the night, having debated the Republican nominee Richard Nixon earlier that evening. Kennedy intended to catch a few hours of sleep at the Michigan Union before a one-day whistle-stop train tour across the state. 1,000 students stood assembled waiting for him. Kennedy had not planned to speak, but in his extemporaneous remarks, he issued a challenge to those assembled that evening that would be remembered and would ripple forward for a long, long time to come. He said, "How many of you are going to be doctors, are willing to spend your days in Ghana? Technicians or engineers, how many of you are willing to work in the Foreign Service and spend your lives traveling around the world? On your willingness to do that, not merely to serve 1 year or 2 years in the service, but on your willingness to contribute part of your life to this country, I think will depend the answer whether a free society can compete." So I come here tonight to go to bed, but I also come here tonight to ask you to join in the effort. The reaction to Kennedy's speech was swift and enthusiastic. In the days that followed, 700 students had signed up for a non-existent international humanitarian program. By March of 1961, the now President Kennedy signed an executive order formally establishing the program we now know as the Peace Corps, some 250,000 participants and growing yet still. Historians have spilled much ink debating the motivation behind Kennedy's Peace Corps. While some note the realpolitik Cold War context of the program, most acknowledge the initiative provided a vehicle for America's pioneering spirit during a turbulent period. In the words of historian Dr. Elizabeth Cobbs Hoffman, a symbol of, quote, what America wanted to be and what much of the world wanted America to be, a counterpoint of idealism to America's affluence and influence. At the very least, one can trace the rhetorical line from the spirit of Kennedy's words that night on the steps of the Michigan Union to his words spoken on the steps of our nation's capital at his inauguration just a few months later. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Whether Kennedy actually wrote those words, I've been told that when asked, his speechwriter Ted Sorensen replied wryly, "Ask not," is besides the point. The speech exemplifies the heroic spirit of the age, heroism as defined by Joseph Campbell as someone who has given his life to something bigger than himself or other than himself. Now, I never served in the Peace Corps, and though a proud graduate of the University of Michigan, that historic 1960 night preceded both my arrival on campus and in this world. I think I took my daughter to those steps, not just because I wanted her to touch a place where history was made, but as she sets out on her path in life, I wanted her to touch a place where an ideal was given voice, the seemingly simple but presently elusive idea that life is not just about what you get, but it's about what you give. It's not just about rights granted, but it's about responsibilities discharged. It's not just about freedoms taken, but it's about sacrifice made. Ask not, asked Kennedy of his generation, what is in it for me? Ask rather, what is my role in it? What is my responsibility, and what is my contribution towards a betterment of the world in which I live? Today is Yom Kippur. Today is a day set aside for an audit of the soul, to acknowledge our wrongdoings, and to seek and grant forgiveness. Today is a day that reminds us of the fragility of life, an opportunity to stare in the face of our own mortality and reflect on the degree to which we're leveraging the short span of our lives wisely. But at its core, Yom Kippur is a day to touch an ideal which in its fulfillment signals a triumph of the human spirit, and in its breach proclaims the sting of human failure. Simple in formulation, but difficult in implementation, Yom Kippur reminds us that we all exist in relation to others, and therefore what we do matters. By way of our actions, we have the potential to transcend the limits of our own self-interest and positively impact the world in which we live. Conversely, by way of our actions or inactions, we have the power to do harm to the world and the people in it. Long before the moral philosopher John Stuart Mill wrote that no person is an entirely isolated being, our Jewish texts and traditions, they argued the same. Yes, Genesis chapter 1 introduces humanity in the grandest terms, created in the image of God to fill the earth and master it. But not a chapter passes before that human being is placed in Eden in a caretaking role to till and tend the garden. In other words, to be responsible for it. What about our obligations to our fellow? Am I my brother's keeper, Cain asks of God, with the blood of Abel still flowing? All of Jewish ethics, a teacher of mine once said, is really just an extended response to Cain. We are our brothers and sisters and neighbors' keeper. We dare not stand idly by. And what of our obligations to our community? Here too our tradition is clear. Both Noah and Abraham, they were both born into wicked generations, but as Jews, we lay claim to the patrimony of the latter, not the former. Because when Abraham heard of the imminent destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, he entered into debate with God. When Noah heard similar, he entered into his ark. Do not separate yourself from the community, teaches the ethics of our fathers. Our humanity does not exist in a vacuum. Our deeds impact those around us, and each one of us bears the potential to move the needle of the human condition and the world in which we live. We need look no further than the prayers of these next 24 hours to take note of the aspirations of the day. Earlier, we began the evening with an acknowledgement that our prayers are to be recited in the midst of a community of imperfect souls. The biblical Yom Kippur ritual, as described in tomorrow's Torah reading, or the service of the high priest, as described in the Avodah service of tomorrow afternoon, are all performed in a communal setting. We announce our transgressions not in the first person singular, but in the first person plural, ashamnu, bagadnu, gazalnu. What a strange thing it is to confess our private sins in person or virtually in the company of a congregation. Until, of course, you realize that we do so in order to remind ourselves that our actions, they're never just about us. Our mistakes, our miscues, and misdeeds have consequences on others. We have hurt others, diminished others, and inflicted pain on others, no different than others have done so to us. As the poet John Donne wrote, "No man is an island. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main." Yom Kippur, it's our reminder that we are all part of the main. What we do, for better or for worse, by way of sins or of commission or omission, matters. 60 years after Kennedy's charge to our nation, the civic idealism of yesteryear seems so very distant. We've awoken to its dystopian inverse, a generation led by the assertion that putting oneself first is somehow a moral virtue to be celebrated. Indeed, if I had to put my finger on the thread that binds our era's shortcomings together, it's that ours is a generation akin to the second child of the Passover Seder table, in that we believe that our personal interests exist independently of the collective narrative. No one owes anything to anyone. As Wade Davis recently wrote, a world that has lionized the individual at the expense of the community, a world where concern for the other is viewed as some sort of extravagance, a world where the failure to put your own interests first is interpreted as a sign of weakness, a world where citizens who are willing to make a sacrifice, even the ultimate sacrifice, are dismissed as suckers. We have failed in so many ways to take seriously our role in shaping the world in which we live. We declare our hands clean. We point fingers. We pass the blame. We point to the magnitude of the problem to justify our inaction, or we pass the buck to the other guy or the next generation. Like the prophet of the day, Jonah, when we see something, instead of saying something or, God forbid, doing something, we run the other way. We dismiss ideas that don't conform to our own, smug in the security of our own ideological certitude, rather than struggling with the uncomfortable. We cancel that which makes us squirm instead of engaging in difficult conversations that could change people's minds and the world. We reject a worthy cause in its entirety because we find an aspect of it objectionable, as if any of the causes or organizations we ourselves support would ever pass such a stringent purity test. You know, I'm reminded of my good friend Sadie Goldstein, who goes to the butcher to buy her chicken on Shabbos, and she's not satisfied with looking at the chicken from across the counter, so she asks the butcher to hand her the bird. She lifts up a wing and sniffs it suspiciously, then the other one, then one leg at a time, a schmeck here, a schmeck there. No part of the chicken is left unexamined. On and on she goes until the butcher blurts out, "Mrs. Goldstein, do you think you could pass such a test?" Moral escapism comes in a variety of forms, and sniffing our noses is but one tactic of turning inward, turning away, and abdicating personal agency. We see an environmental crisis and we shrug our shoulders, wondering what we can do. We see a racial problem and we console ourselves with the thought that at least we are not those kind of racists. We see economic inequity and we dive back under the safety blanket of our lives. The book of Deuteronomy warned against the person who fancied himself immune, thinking, "I shall be safe as I follow my own heart." You may recall the famous exchange between Henry David Thoreau and his dear friend Ralph Waldo Emerson. Emerson visited Thoreau as he sat in jail for his refusal to pay taxes which would support a government policies that he objected to. Emerson asked Thoreau, "Henry, what are you doing in there?" To which Thoreau replied, "Waldo, the question is, what are you doing out there?" That's the question of Yom Kippur. What are you doing out there? It is simply not enough in this day and age to care. You have to do. You have to make that problem your problem. To be a citizen of a family, a faith community, a nation or world, it's always a balancing act between individual rights and civic responsibilities. The very word civic, it comes from the Latin corona civica, the garland that would be given in ancient Rome to a person who saved a fellow citizen's life. For civil society to be upheld, we must consent to that society making a claim on us, and that private desire yields to public good. It's a Jewish value, and it's an American value. It's actually what the word republic means, a form of government in which the good of the country is a public, not private matter. It's also not rocket science. If you want to drive a car, then you have to wear a seatbelt. If you want to have free speech, then you can't falsely cry fire in a crowded theater. If you want the right to own a gun, then it is a right that must be balanced with public safety. And if you want to have an earth that we, our children and grandchildren, can live in, then you have to live in a manner that reflects that desire. John Stuart Mill put it best when he wrote, "Everyone who receives the protection of society owes a return for the benefit, and the fact of living in society renders it indispensable that each should be bound to observe a certain line of conduct towards the rest." If there was ever a time to make a political virtue of not amplifying our own personal freedoms over the safety of others, ours is that time. What a shanda, what an embarrassment that our country, once led by an ask not, has been reduced to a mask not. Wearing a mask or social distancing reflects not just my fear that a virus will spread from you to me, but my fear for your well-being, that you yourself are the object of my concern. Wearing a mask or social distancing are not such earth-shattering acts of leadership. They are basic gestures of citizenship and acceptance that my actions matter and that I have a role to play in the health crisis of our time. Civil society withers not merely by way of the rise of authoritarian leadership. It withers and it dies when those laying claim to the title of citizen forget, neglect, or cease to protect the obligations, like voting, that come with being a member of civil society. Don't worry, I'm not going to announce the formation of a Jewish Peace Corps. I did think about it, but then I realized that calling for, as I did last week, a reconstruction of American Jewish life was enough for one holiday season. But that said, Yom Kippur is a call to action, and I want to call you to action in three very specific ways, by way of the three concentric circles of our existence: our wider community, our Jewish community, and ourselves. First, the wider community. It's with great pride that I share that through the hard work of Rabbis Witkowski and Philp, Mara Bernstein, and our lay leaders Amy Steiner, Susan Newmark, and Samantha Tannenbaum, these past months have brought forth a revitalized vision for Tikkun Olam, social justice programming. Park Avenue Synagogue has a long tradition of putting our values into action by way of our food pantry, mitzvah day, and otherwise. This year and in the years ahead, through the blueprint of Naaseh V'Nishma, Hebrew for we will act and we will learn, we're putting service and education at the forefront of our synagogue agenda. Be it the challenge of climate change, poverty and hunger, voting rights, racial inequality, or LGBTQ and gender equity, all of us have a role to play, and justice work will be part of our communal expectation. The Tikkun Olam Committee has assembled an array of opportunities to learn, to donate, to volunteer, all paths for you to actualize your ask not. Check out the website, and if there's a cause dear to your heart that you would like on the synagogue agenda, then come to the meeting and get involved. By this point in the holidays, you hopefully realize that every service has been framed by way of one of the 5 note cards we sent home to membership in your holiday care package. Tonight is card number 4, Kehillah, a time to renew your commitment to strengthening this community and this world. So like the good televangelist I've become, I'm asking you for your commitment today. I'm calling out cards. Fill out the card. Send it in to me. Tell me the issue that you want our community to work on, and make a commitment this year to get involved to mend this broken world of ours. Second, the Jewish community, specifically our own synagogue. I'm pleased to share that by way of the hard work of our clergy, lay leaders, and professionals, a community covenant has been drafted, a copy of which exists on the membership page of our website on the home page, a document enumerating a series of commitments regarding what it means to be part of the Park Avenue Synagogue family, a commitment that all our members treat each other and our clergy and staff with respect, an affirmation of our entire membership in every variety of family structure, in all our ethnic, sexual, and gender diversity, a zero-tolerance policy for any form of harassment, and an expectation that every member will communicate respectfully to each other and members of our clergy and staff in person and online. For all of our talk of communal boundaries, we must never forget the most important one, that of our own personhood. Each one of us has a right to feel safe and respected. The covenant's on the website and will arrive in your member inbox so you can click and sign, signaling your assent to being a stakeholder in our Kehillah Kedoshah, our sacred community. What better way to begin the new year than by making a commitment to being a culture carrier of our communal values? Third and finally, ourselves. Here, I have no program to lean on and no document to share. It's just us. It is the primary activity that we are asked to perform on Yom Kippur, the act of tshuva, of repentance. If the point of today is to remind us of the effect our words and actions have on others, then it is by way of tshuva that we give that ideal its fullest expression, both in the concession that our words and actions have caused hurt and the hope that our words and actions can bring about healing. Many are living in close quarters, making decisions in deeply imperfect conditions, every deed and misdeed magnified beyond proportion. Others are separated from family and friends, a distance that has made some stronger, but for others, many others, a source of confusion, misgiving, and distrust. Brothers and sisters, husbands and wives, between the generations, between colleagues, even between rabbis and their congregants, every other day of the year, we walk the earth with the cheek to tell ourselves that every sour exchange, every relationship gone awry, every tiff and every dispute was due to the fault and failing of another person. Not today. Today we ask not what that person did to us, but what we ourselves did to prompt or perpetuate the cycle of hurt. Today we don that uncomfortable cloak of personal agency. We wear it, we own it, and we do everything in our power to reach beyond our egos and mend those relationships in need of repair. I began by way of a story about my daughter, and I'm going to end by way of her favorite childhood story, a story that I hope that she and all of her peers, but really all of us, take to heart. It's a story of the small shtetl that received word of a planned visit of the king. In anticipation of the royal visit, the town leaders decided to fill a giant barrel with wine and present it to His Royal Highness upon his arrival. It was a lovely plan, but where was such a modest town going to get enough wine to fill such a giant barrel? Each citizen, they decided, would bring one flask filled with wine and pour it into the giant barrel. And this way, the barrel would be filled with wine for the king. The barrel was placed in the center of town with a ladder reaching up to the top, and every day, citizens lined up to pour their flask of wine into the barrel. The day finally arrived for the king's visit. The people were so excited to present this wonderful gift to the king. The king was escorted to the center of town and presented with a royal goblet, which was filled with wine from the giant barrel. But when the king drank, his face fell with disappointment. The citizens asked why he was so unhappy, to which the king responded, "It's just plain water." As it turns out, each citizen thought, why should I be the one to pour a flask of wine? I'll pour in water instead. I'm sure each one thought that no one will notice if there's just one flask of water among all that wine. Everyone in the town made the same calculation, and so no one poured in wine, but rather water instead. Everyone assumed that someone else would step up. Today is Yom Kippur. A year of great moments sits before us, and the fate of our country, our world, and the common good hangs in the balance. Will we step up and join in the effort? Will we be watered-down versions of our best selves, or shall our actions prove worthy of the King of Kings? Will we do everything in our power to mend this world and the relationships we hold dear? The answer to these questions is in our hands. What we do matters. May each one of us and all of us together prove worthy of the ideal of the day. Shana Tova, Good Yom Tov. We open up our machzors. We are on page 223. Page 223, the ark is opened, Ya'aleh.
יעלה תחנוננו מערב, ויבוא שבתנו מבוקר, ויראה רינוננו עד ערב. יעלה קולנו מערב, ויבוא צדקתנו מבוקר, ויראה פדיוננו עד ערב. יעלינו ינו מערב, ויבוא סליחתנו מבוקר, ויראה נקתנו עד ערב. יעלה מנוסנו מערב, ויבוא למענו מבוקר, ויראה כיפורנו עד ערב. יעלה ישענו מערב, ויבוא טהורנו מבוקר, ויראה חינוננו עד ערב. יעלה זיכרוננו מערב, ויבוא ויהודנו מבוקר, ויראה הדרתנו עד ערב. יעלה דופקנו מערב, ויבוא גילנו מבוקר, ויראה בקשתנו עד ערב. יעלה אנקתנו מערב, ויבוא אליך מבוקר, ויראה אלינו עד ערב.
As the ark is closed, you may be seated. Hanashama lach v'haguf pa'alach. The soul is yours. The body is your creation. It's a beautiful, simple liturgical poem. You made us, God. You formed us. Our inclinations, our desires come from you. Therefore, were you to destroy us, you would be destroying your own handiwork. The relationship is captured beautifully by the Hebrew language. The Hebrew word for creator yotzer, and inclination, yetzer, well, you can hear it. They share the same root. And when we turn to the book of Isaiah, we see the complexity of these images and the human condition. Ve'ata Adonai avinu ata, anachnu hachomer ve'ata yotzrenu. But now, O Lord, you are our Father. We are the clay, and you are the yotzer. You are the creator. You are the potter. Forgive us, Isaiah says, because essentially, haneshama lach. Forgive us because we are what you made us. If we fall short, if we miss the mark, it's because you, God, gave us the freedom to do so. Now, if I were a trial judge, I might conclude that blaming God for our sins is not the best defense. After all, God did give us free will. We believe that we can control our yetzer, our inclinations. But tonight, on trial, boosted by just a bit of chutzpah, we remind God of that moment immediately following the flood in Genesis when God promises never again to destroy human beings in this way. And we paraphrase what God might have been thinking. How can I punish these people for their yetzer, for their inclinations, when I am their yotzer, their creator? Tonight, in this moment of judgment, remember, God, we are what you made us. We are your children. We are the work of your hands. Haneshama lach, page 225.
שמך אדוני עשה למען שמך בעבור כבוד שמך כי אל חנון ורחום שמך למען שמך אדוני וסלחת לעווננו כי רב הוא.
Tov. Kihine kachomer. We are, as Rabbi Zuckerman just reminded us in the words of the prophet Jeremiah, we are as substance, clay, in the hands of the potter. I have to say, just between you and me and whoever's watching, I've always had a bit of a dilemma with this piyut, with this poem. Each one of the different images, stones in the hands of the mason or iron in the hands of the smith, feels like a little bit of moral obfuscation. A problem that I had that was brought home by the tremendous sermon that Rabbi Cosgrove just gave. Because if we are not but something to be shaped by a master artisan, then nothing seems to be our fault. I have a bit of a problem with that. Rabbi Louis Jacobs comes to try to save me from my quandary and says, but even the greatest of artisans can only do so much with poor materials. So perhaps in this poem, we're apologizing to God for being the faulty substances that we are. Now, this back and forth reminds me of a meme that's going around the playgrounds of New York City right now, which is really where I get most of my information. And it says, it's God, 5780. I think maybe you should be apologizing to us a little bit more than we need to be apologizing to you right now. That's what they're saying in the playgrounds of New York. And I'm reminded of the Hasidic story where a rabbi's students go and say, Rabbi, how should we spend EREV Yom Kippur? What's the holiest way? The rabbi says, go to the outskirts of town, to this small hovel on a dirt road, peer in the window after shul on Yom Kippur, and you'll see the holiest way. So the students go. And they go and they peer into the window of this tiny shack, and they see a man sitting there. They see a man sitting there, and he's talking to God, just talking. And he says, okay, God, it's time. And he goes into a closet and he brings out a book. And he opens it up and he says, God, here are all the things that I did this year that I'm sorry for. And I am apologizing. And he reads each one out loud. And he finishes and he's weeping, having recounted every misdeed he committed to every person and to God over the course of the year. And then, shocking the Hasidim, he goes into the closet and he pulls out a second book, this one even bigger than the first, and he says, okay, God, now here are all the things that you did to me that I need you to apologize for this year. And he opens it and he starts reading those aloud. He finishes the book. He holds the two up and he says, God, I've done some bad things. And you haven't been so great either. But it's Yom Kippur. Let's just let bygones be bygones. I'll forgive you and you forgive me. Gemar Tov, Shana Tova. Closes the books and goes to bed. That is the holiest way one could spend EREV Yom Kippur. As we sing through Ki Hinei Kachomer, we acknowledge that we could be better substance. We could do better, be better in the hands of that great potter. And we acknowledge the potter could do a little bit better as well sometimes. We act in concert with one another because it's together with God and ourselves that we are going to the Taken Olam, that we're going to repair this world. Shana Tova. We turn to Kinei HaKachomer on page 227.
Kein Allah
God, sovereign, who sits on a throne of mercy, acting with unbounded grace, forgiving the sins of your people one by one as each comes before you, you generously forgiving sinners and pardoning transgressors, acting charitably with every living thing, do not repay them for their misdeeds. We are on page 232, El Melech Yoshev al Kisei Rachamim.
לנו לומר 13, זכור לנו היום ברית 13, כי הודעת לעניו מקדם כמו שכתוב, וירד אדוני בענן ויתייצב עמו שם, ויקרא בשם אדוני, ויעבור אדוני על פניו, ויקרא together. אדוני, אדוני, אל רחום וחנון, ערך אפיים ורב חסד ואמת, נוצר חסד לאלפים, נושא עוון ופשע, חטא ונקה. וסלחת לעווננו לחטאתנו ונחלתנו. סלח לנו אבינו כי חטאנו.
We are on page 233. In just a moment, we will rise for Shema Kolenu. The ark will be opened, asking God to hear our prayers, one of the central prayers of the high holiday season, calling on God in prayer. You know, over the summer, the article that I read, it says, the title, "In COVID," and the article was about Google searches for prayer these last months, as were tracked in 95 countries. And the researcher discovered that those who searched with the keyword prayer, that those numbers had risen to the highest levels ever these last months, higher than Christmas, Easter, Ramadan, everything. An exponential excess of prayers from this time last year based on Google searches. And it doesn't even capture everything. Obviously, there are many poor people without internet, or elderly people who don't know how to use the internet. And most of all, it had no indication of what most prayers were being said on the internet. And the data was reaffirmed in a Pew study that said that 24% of Americans were strengthened by way of prayer in these last months. So the question that I want to ask as we reach Shema Kolenu is why do people pray? Now, there are probably as many answers to that as there are people who do pray, but I think prayer reflects an anxiety. It reflects, first and foremost, a coping mechanism for our fears, seeking relief, seeking comfort, a prayer for perseverance. I think prayer has an element of which that it addresses our loneliness. I think of Hannah, about whom we read on Rosh Hashanah, that nobody in the world listened to her, and so she turned to God in prayer. You know, in anticipation of the holidays, we had these ark visits where people were allowed to spend a moment in front of the ark, and I was very skeptical about it. I was wondering, would people show up? And not only people showed up, but people emailed incredibly powerful emails of the experience to stand before the ark in prayer. And I think that people pray as such because God is the one place where people can give expression to how they feel and not be interrupted and just be in the presence of a divine being who's listening, which I think leads us to the third kind of prayer, and that I think is a prayer of Shema Kolenu, which is a prayer of empathy. Prayer is a language to measure the degree to which we are in touch with other people's needs. We remember that in the Exodus story, redemption only came for Israel when God heard Israel's cry. Only when Moses heard the cry of the Israelite did Moses become Moses. The Sefer Hasidim wrote that why some people's prayers are left unanswered might be because one who doesn't carry the pain and sorrow of his friend in his heart will never have his or her prayers answered. And I think this is a prayer of Shema Kolenu. We're asking God to feel our pain, to hear our cry, and so too we promise to hear the cry of the world. We rise, the ark is opened. We're on page 233, Shema Kolenu.
Shema, Shema Kolenu. Shema, Shema, Shema Kolenu Adonai Eloheinu. Chus v'rachem aleinu, v'kabel berachamim uveratzon et תפילתנו. השיבנו אדוני אליך, ונשובה, חדש ימינו, חדש ימינו, חדש ימינו אל תשליכנו מלפניך, ורוח קודשך, רוח קודשך, אל תיקח ממנו. אל תשליכנו, אל תשליכנו, אל תשליכנו לעת זקנה, ככלות כוחנו, ככלות כוחנו, אל תעזבנו, אל תשליכנו מלפניך, ורוח קודשך אל תיקח ממנו. תשליכנו לעת זקנה, ככלות כוחנו, ככלות כוחנו, אל תעזבנו. ברחמים וברצון את תפילתנו.
We may be seated as the ark is closed. Our God and God of our ancestors, do not abandon us, do not forsake us, do not shame us, do not annul your covenant with us. Draw us close to your Torah, Teach us your mitzvot, show us your ways. Open our hearts to revere your name. Circumcise our hearts to love you, then we will turn to you faithfully with a perfect heart. And as befits your great name, pardon and forgive our sins, as the psalmist wrote, for the sake of your own name, forgive my sin, though it be great. We are on page 234, Ki anu amecha.
כי אנו עמך ואתה אלוהינו. אנו עבדיך ואתה אדוננו. אנו נחלתך ואתה גורלנו. אנו חרמך ואתה נותרנו. אנו רעייתך ואתה דודנו. אנו עמך ואתה מלכנו. אנו ממירך ואתה ממירנו. אנו עזי פנים ואתה רחום וחנון. אנו קשי עורף ואתה ערך אפיים. אנו מלא עוון ואתה מלא רחמים. אנו ימינו כצל עובר ואתה הוא שנותיך לא יתאמו. איי 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 אלה לה לי ני ני אנה נה ני ני ני.
We are on the bottom of page 234, leading into Vidui, which can be found on page 235. I invite you to please rise.
אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, תבוא לפניך תפילתנו, ואל תתעלם מתחינתנו. שאין אנחנו עזיפנים וקשי עורף לומר לפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו. צדיקים אנחנו ולא חטאנו, אבל אנחנו ואבותינו חטאנו. איי 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 איי. אשמנו, בגדנו, גזלנו, דיברנו דופי, הבינו והרשענו, זדנו, חמסנו, טפלנו שקר. איי 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 איי. יעצנו רע, כיזבנו, לצנו, מרדנו, ניצנו, שררנו, אבינו, פשענו, שררנו, קישינו עורף. איי 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 שיחתנו, תיהבנו, תהינו,
In just a moment, we are going to daven, continuing confessing our sins, al-chet, which can be found on page 237. Page 237. Rabbi Witkowski, look at you. There you are. How you doing?
Well, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. This is an exquisite moment for me because you have no idea what I'm going to ask you. Right now at this time. So lest you think this is pre-recorded, this is totally, well, there's one part of this which is scripted. Because I always tell a story around this time, and I want to tell you a story. It's a quick story, which is a story told in Rabbi Moshe Yosher's biography of the Chafetz Chaim, about a 17-year-old yeshiva student who was arrested during World War I by the Tsarist police under suspicion of spying for the enemy. And the boy was put on trial and he faced death. His lawyer decided to enlist the greatest rabbi of the day, a man named the Chafetz Chaim, to testify as a character witness. Before the Chafetz Chaim took the stand, the lawyer introduced the rabbi to the court as a man of great moral stature, and he relayed a story about him. He said that one time, said the lawyer, this rabbi was robbed, and as the robber ran away, Rabbi Kagan, the Chafetz Chaim, chased after him, shouting, I forgive you, I forgive you. Why? Because the Chafetz Chaim didn't want that even his own robber should face divine retribution on his account. The judge found this entire story to be a little much and pulled the counsel to the bench and asked the attorney if that incident had really happened, to which the attorney responded, Your Honor, I'm not so sure either, but I will tell you this. They sure don't say things like that about me and you. I love this story about the things they say about me and you because we're about to say the al-chet, which is a moment that we're supposed to look inward and evaluate our own actions. So Rabbi Witkowski, you have no idea what I'm about to say, but when we say al-chet, is it valuable to think about what other people say about us, or should we only be thinking about our own internal compass?
I think we should think about what other people say. I think we all have blind spots and things that we think we're doing okay on, and it isn't until someone comes along and says, you know, Ethan, what you just did was actually that we realize that sometimes our moral compass needs a little retuning, and that might be what we're doing here tonight.
Right. I mean, certainly, you know, counsel, you have two beautiful kids. I mean, part of being a parent is saying, don't listen to what other people, right? Listen, kind of very Emersonian, listen to your own heart, and you can't go wrong. It's very different than that other idea. And so I think there's a balancing act. I think you're right, Rabbi. I think it's this idea that we all have blind spots. The task and the challenge of this day is to think outside of ourselves and to see, as the poet Robert Burns says, to the giftee sees us, to see ourselves as others see us, but at the same time not let that determine right or wrong.
Well, that's even the words of the machzor itself can serve as that function. Sometimes we're reading along and the rabbis have given us this list, a really long one, of all the different kinds of sins that maybe we've done over the course of the year, and I find myself sometimes thinking, well, really, have I done? I don't recall running to tell tales recently, but that calls me, oh, maybe I did. Maybe it will jog a memory of something that I'd forgotten about that happened this year. And so even the machzor itself can be that reflective mirror.
Thank you. Thank you. A lot more to say, but we have a cantor ready to sing. We are on page 237. To you and to your family, Rabbi Witkowski, a sweet, health-filled year. Al Chet, page 237. If you're able, I invite you to please rise.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך באונס וברצון, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך באימוץ הלב, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך ביצר הרע, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך ביודעים ובלא יודעים. ועל כולם אלו סליחה, סלח לנו, מחל לנו, כפר לנו. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בכך שוב חזר, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בכפת שוחד, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך.
We've sinned against you through condescension, and we've sinned against you through stubbornness.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בעיניים רמות, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בעזות מצח, ועל כולם אלו סליחות, סלח לנו, מחל לנו, סלח לנו, מחל לנו, כפר לנו. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בפריקת עול, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בפלילות, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך.
We have sinned against you by betraying trust. We've sinned against you by succumbing to confusion. For all these sins, forgiving God, forgive us, pardon us, and grant us atonement.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בתשומת יד, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בתמחון לבב, ועל כולם אלו סליחות, סלח לנו, מחל לנו, כפר לנו.
We may be seated. Just a moment, we'll turn to page 242, Rahmana Da'ani. Since the synagogue began streaming a few years ago, the clergy began to receive letters and emails from congregants from far and wide, in print, on social media, by email. They're mostly warm, but sometimes critical, but always very engaged. It's an amazing thing for the clergy team, especially during this time of COVID when Jews cannot enter their houses of worship, to see how many people from how many places and frankly different streams of Judaism and frankly religion are with us each and every week. In late June, I received an email from a woman who lives in Bethlehem, PA. Her name is Siona Breutlet, and because her community is not live streaming, she began to join us week in and week out, and she wrote many, many nice things about the rabbis, but her most effusive praise was reserved for the cantors. First, obviously, because Park Avenue has the best cantors in the world, but also because her grandfather was a cantor, but not just any cantor, but Cantor Moshe Kusevitsky, who, if you know a thing or two about the cantorate, alongside Rosenblatt, was probably the most accomplished chazan of the 20th century. Born in Russia, having escaped the Nazis, Kusevitsky eventually emigrated to America, serving Brooklyn's Temple Bethel until his passing in 1966. One can only imagine, given Kusevitsky's gifts, given his life experience, what it meant for him to stand before God pleading the case of the Jewish people. This short prayer, Rahmana Da'ani, God of mercy, asks God to answer our prayers with compassion. Kusevitsky put it to music It's a crazy story, but the manuscript was lost and never to be heard until a recording was found. And that recording, due to the hard work of our music department, was transcribed, enabling our community the honor to connect with the golden era of Chazanut, which after a brief video hello from Siona, we will all hear as it's found on page 242.
Hi, Siona. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
How did you find out about Park Avenue Synagogue?
It's one of the silver linings to COVID. So for COVID, my synagogue did not stream services. So I searched on the web, found Park Avenue. I fell in love with the service and I'm devoted. I'm grateful to y'all.
Tell me about your relationship with your grandfather, the great Cantor Moshe Kosevitsky.
My relationship was wonderful. There's a photograph of me in his arms and both our mouths are wide open. Here in New York, I know him to be the cantor at Temple Bethel on 49th Street in Borough Park. They were out in the street listening to him. And people came from their shuls in order to hear Papa. And every Shabbos, during announcements just before the Adon Olam, I learned to, I don't know how it started, leave my father's seat and run up on stage and sit in my grandpa's lap. I remember when he already had cancer. It was a few months before his death. And he had just produced his last record album. It was the Mogen Avot, and it was still in proof form. It hadn't been put out there yet. He drew me into his study, which was also where he always practiced. He put on the record and started singing. I had a private performance of the Mogen Avot, and it was maybe his last time. I'll never forget it. So, Cantor Azi, when you started singing it several months ago, and I felt it. Oh my God, you did his style. You did his way. There is no way I can communicate to you what you did for me. I'm grateful. Thank you for keeping his legacy alive.
Rachamon odeone, Rachamon odeone, lahaniei aneno. Rachamon adeonei, lisavirei libo, lisavirei libo, libo Rachamon odeone lemakichei rucho, lemakichei rucho, lemakichei rucho. Rachamono perok, Rachamono sheisiv, Rachamono rechamolon. Hashto bagolo, hashto bagolo. Udizemar koriv.
We turn now to page 243, Avinu Malkeinu. We have sinned in your presence. Avinu Malkeinu, we have no sovereign but you. Please rise as the ark is opened. Avinu Malkeinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Koleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu lefanecha.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chamol Aleinu, Ve'al Aleinu, Ve'tapeinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, Aledecha, V'cherev v'ram, Ve'aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Kalech Otzar, Umastir me'aleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Kotveinu b'sefer chaim tovim. Avinu Malkeinu, Chadesh Aleinu, Chadesh Aleinu, Shana Tova, Shana Tova. Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Koleinu, Shema Koleinu, Shema Koleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu,
Avinu Malkeinu,
Shema Koleinu, Shema Koleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu,
Avinu Malkeinu, inscribe us for good in the book of life. Avinu Malkeinu, inscribe us in the book of redemption. Avinu Malkeinu, inscribe us in the book of sustenance. Avinu Malkeinu, inscribe us in the book of merit. Avinu Malkeinu, inscribe us in the book of forgiveness. Avinu Malkeinu, have mercy on us, answer us, for our deeds are insufficient. Deal with us charitably and lovingly, and redeem us.
Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu Vaneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu Vaneinu, Ki ein banu masim. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu Vaneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu Vaneinu, Ki ein banu masim. Sing with us. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshienu.
Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu Vaneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu Vaneinu, Ki ein banu masim.
Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshienu. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshienu. We remain standing, Kaddish Shalem, on page 245. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחיי חון וביומי חון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב ואימרו אמן יהי שמי רבה מברך יתברך 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 וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשא בריחו לילה לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. תתקבל צלותון ובאותון לכל בית ישראל, קודם אבון דבשמיא ואמרו אמן. יהי של אמר רבה מן שמיא, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל,
We remain standing, page 246, Aleinu Leshabeach.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי ארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ כמו שאנחנו.
כי המלכות שלך יעלון תמלוך בכבוד, ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
If you are in mourning, observing the yahrzeit of a loved one, I'd ask you to remain standing. Otherwise, you may be seated. The words of Kaddish, Mourner's Kaddish, can be found on page 247. 247, Kaddish Yatom. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah, Be'alma divrach Yerutei ve'amlich malchutei, Ve'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala u'v'zman kariv ve'imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevorach Le'olam Omei Maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitale v'yitalal Shemei Dekudasha Brichu. Le'ela le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabbah min Shemaya. V'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru Amen. May God, who ordains harmony in the universe, grant peace to us, to Israel, to all of humanity, and let us all say Amen. You may be seated. Good Yontif. Welcome, everyone. It is wonderful to have you here from wherever you are, to observe Yom Kippur, to be with us in prayer, to be with us by way of virtual community, all together, the most sacred day of the Jewish year. And we welcome you to Park Avenue Synagogue. If this is your first time here, if you are here with us every year, or if you're here with us every single day for our tefillot, we are so happy that you are here with us this evening. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I want to thank Cantor Schwartz and Cantor Brook for leading our services so beautifully, to David Enlow and to the ensemble. Thank you for your musical leadership. Thank you so much to Rabbi Zuckerman and Rabbi Witkowski for all of your words of Torah. We look forward to hearing more from you tomorrow. It is a wonderful assemblage of people who make this work. We're going to thank everyone formally tomorrow, but I do want to remind everyone just how many people who aren't here on the screen who make it possible that all of this can happen. And we thank each and every one of you for doing so. All of our Zoom participants, I've seen you, everyone's seen you all the way through. I'm not going to thank you, but it's great to see you. It creates a sense of community for people at home and for people here. Tomorrow morning, 8:30 a.m., the traditional Shacharit services begin, and then we are going to have our Yizkor service at 1 o'clock p.m. We are going to, 9:45 a.m. is when we take the Torah out of the Ark, and the Torah reading and the sermon and all that good stuff. Our full day of Yom Kippur, the Yizkor service will be at 1, and then the dialogue during the break. This year we added something. We have a wonderful tradition, and we're grateful for it, to always be in dialogue with Dr. Richard Haas of the Council on Foreign Relations. There's 1 or 2 or 300 things going on in the world that we're going to ask him about tomorrow. So that's during the break. And then immediately after, this week we scheduled, in light of the very, very sad passing of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, we're honored to have a congregant of ours who clerked for Justice Ginsburg, Yale law professor Abby Gluck, is going to be in dialogue with Jeffrey Rosen, the president of the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, the two of them speaking both from a personal and philosophical and legacy view of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So that will start at 3 o'clock, and then Mincha will continue, I believe, at 4:30, and then Ne'ilah, the sound of the final shofar blast, at 7:22, I believe, is what we are aiming for, and we will not be a minute before, and we will not be a minute less. I want to encourage you, for all of your high holiday information, to visit the Hub, which contains a full schedule of services for youth, main service, resources, holidays at home, how to download a machzor, all of that stuff. We encourage you to view the website and to agree and to click on the the communal covenant, which is going to be there for all to see. This is Yom Kippur, and we are here recognizing that many of our relationships are broken, and it is a time that we are supposed to take a step outside of ourselves, have those conversations with our loved ones, and everyone is a little broigus with each other. It's been a tough year, even for Sadie and Abe. It's been a tough year, and they were having one of their big blowout fights, arguments, and in the middle of one particular exchange, Abe yells out to Sadie, "Sadie, you're going to be sorry. I'm going to leave you." To which Sadie replies, "Dear Abe, make up your mind. Which is it going to be? Because you can't have it both ways." All right, that one, all right, I'm working on it. I'm warming up. So it wasn't always so bad between Sadie and Abe, because you may recall that when Sadie and Abe, when they first got married and they were on their way to their honeymoon, and Abe turned to his bride and he said, "Sadie, if my father hadn't left me a fortune, would you still have married me?" To which Sadie turned to her Abe and replied, "Abe, my dear, I would have married you no matter who left you a fortune." All right, we redeemed ours. All right, I'll give you one more. So Sadie and Abe, they lived a long life together, and they sat there celebrating their good fortune. They were selling not only their 65th birthday that they shared together, but their 40th wedding anniversary, surrounded by family and friends. And as everyone leaves, there's a knock on the door. And who's at the door? Not Elijah. It's a magical fairy wishing them congratulations and 2 wishes, one for each of them. And Sadie can't believe their good fortune and says, I wish for something that I've always wanted, a trip around the world. And the fairy waves her hand and poof, in Sadie's hands are 2 first-class tickets, all the trimmings, round the world cruise, everything she dreamed of. And the fairy turns to Abe and says, all right, Abe, your turn. What is it that you want? To which Abe replies, well, if you really want to know, I wish I had a wife who was 30 years younger than me. And the fairy picks up her wand and poof, Abe is 95 years old. All right. And with that, it's important to smile. It's important to laugh, because if we laugh, if we smile, you know what we might just do? We might just laugh and smile at ourselves. And if we can laugh at ourselves, then we might just see how human we are. And in that humanity, we might just be able to be reconciled with the people in our lives. And that is what Yom Kippur is about. We're on page 249. We conclude our service, Adon Olam.
אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נשא וחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נשא וחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא
והוא לי וחי גולי וצור חבלי בית שרה והוא ניסי ומנוס לי מנת כוסי ביום אקרא אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נשא וחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא
בידו הפקיד רוחי בית אישן ועירה ועם רוחי גוויעתי אדוני לי ולא הירא אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נשא וחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא גמר טוב, שנה טובה.
Shana Tova, good Yontif, everybody. Shana Tova.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, everybody in control room.